They, the outsiders, determined to crash the two-party race, so-called minor candidates whose surging support is adding a new element of unpredictability into the US presidential election. This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Jane Dutton in Doha. It has been more than 160 years since the US had a president who wasn't a Republican or a Democrat. And while different parties field candidates at each election, few attract any real support. But with large numbers of voters holding unfavorable views of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, outsiders are getting rare national attention this time around, specifically Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson and, as Patty Culhane reports, Jill Stein of the Green Party.
When you think of political party conventions, you probably think of this or this, but probably not this.
Let's start again over on this side.
While the Democratic and Republican parties have a small army of followers, the scene at the last Green Party convention was a much smaller affair.
Minnesota's on the far side of the room.
But they are hoping this time it will be different, in large part because of voters like these.
I've been Bernie Sanders all along. I'll love him forever for what he's done for us, but I can't follow him behind Hillary Clinton. So it's either Bernie or Jill, never Hillary.
She says she'll vote for Jill Stein, the likely Green Party presidential candidate, who will appear on the ballot in 23 states and the District of Columbia.
Jill, not Hill! Jill.
The Green Party is far to the left of the Democratic Party, promising a single-payer healthcare system, free college, and a pledge to forgive all student loan debt. In foreign policy, they say they would end the fight against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, while issuing a weapons ban on Saudi Arabia and Israel. But few Americans know what they stand for. The only chance the Green Party has to change that is to get into the presidential debates. But Stein is far from reaching the polling number she needs to qualify.
Thank you. Spread the word.
Thank you.
Bernie Sanders has urged his supporters to vote for Democrat Hillary Clinton. There is real concern that if too many of his followers defect, it could mean Donald Trump gets elected.
And you're not right.
It's widely believed that the Green Party is the reason George Bush was first elected in 2000, when they put well-known Ralph Nader on the ballot in Florida.
If Ralph Nader did not appear on the ballot, some of those voters would have stayed home, but some of those voters, if they voted, would have probably gone to Al Gore because George Bush was so far from what Green Party supporters would have liked. And so, were there enough votes there to swing that election? Certainly.
The Green Party has played spoiler in the past, but they have never come even close to being considered an actual contender. They are hoping this year will be different.
God bless you!
Because this is turning out to be an election like no other. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Let's get a snapshot of how the two main third parties are performing. A current poll average shows Libertarian Gary Johnson with 8% of the vote, double that of the Greens' Jill Stein. Those numbers pale in comparison to the Democratic and Republican candidates. Hillary Clinton has the support of more than 43% of voters surveyed, ahead of Donald Trump, who has just under 37%. Well, let's now bring in our guests for this discussion in Philadelphia. Joe Watkins, Republican political strategist and former White House aide to President George H.W. Bush. In New York, Jeanne Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College and strategy advisor for applied technonomics. And in San Francisco, Cliston Brown, political analyst and columnist for the New York Observer. Very warm welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Joe Watkins. How is the Republican Party and you, how are you viewing the Green Party? Is it making the Republicans nervous?
I don't think Republicans are nervous about the Green Party. Republicans have
our party has its own problems right now. This past week has been a very, very difficult week for Republicans nationally, and certainly for the head of the ticket for Donald Trump. He is trailing Hillary Clinton significantly in almost every poll that I've seen. And if the race were held today, he would lose in a landslide to Hillary Clinton. The challenge for Republicans becomes all the down ballot races, all of the people running for the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress and governors who are also on the ticket with Donald Trump, and how they'll be impacted in the individual states. But I don't think Republicans expect either the Green Party or the Libertarian Party to make much of a dent in this election. And they'll do better. They'll get larger percentages than they have perhaps in the past, but it won't be large enough to stop Hillary Clinton from likely winning the election in the fall. That's how it looks today.
Jill Stein says Democrats have always tried to deter people from voting Green by making Republicans sound scary. What did the Republicans do to deter people from voting for the Greens?
Well, the Republicans have their hands full right now with their nominee, Donald Trump. Donald Trump has had a bunch of challenges. He's had a number of fights or feuds with people inside the Republican Party, as well as with a Gold Star family this week alone. And so Republicans are having a hard time just reining in the Republican nominee for president. The party has not had a chance to concentrate on the Green Party or on any other party that might, or Democrats for that matter, who are successfully leading in this race right now.
I'm sure a lot of navel gazing happening then. And we will talk about the Republicans' problems a little bit later on. But Jeanne, I just want to carry on focusing on the Green Party, Jeanne Zaino. Is it a good time for the Green Party, and what do you think their pros and cons are?
It's a very good time for the Green Party. I think in this environment, it is a great time for any third-party movement. And certainly the Green Party, as was mentioned by you just a few minutes ago, is a little bit behind the Libertarian Party. But it is drawing larger interest, particularly among young people. As somebody who works with young people in a college environment all the time, I can tell you I am shocked by how many of them have said they would vote for Bernie Sanders now that he is out of the race. How many of them are saying that they are looking to somebody like a Jill Stein, who has now gotten the nomination of the Green Party. And let's not forget, this is Jill Stein's second time as the nominee of this party. She was also the nominee in 2012. And as was mentioned in the setup piece, a real key here to getting eyeballs on the party and what it represents and really selling it to the American public and giving them a chance to consider it is her opportunity to get into the debates. And unfortunately, the way our debates work is you have to break 15% in the polls to get there. She's not breaking that nearly at this point. And so she will likely be shut out. When she was shut out in 2012, she famously showed up at the debate and was arrested. And so, for somebody like me, I think this is, the height of an anti-democratic way of running things. Because let's not forget, the Presidential Debate Commission is made up of Republicans and Democrats, and they are the ones who dictate the rules of the debate. And so it is the height of a kind of tyrannical way of running a supposedly democratic election to keep people out. Now, I understand the reason that they want to do this, because they don't want somebody who's not at all registering in the polls to be on the stage. But at this point, in this environment, with these two candidates who are distrusted and unliked by vast majorities of the American public, it makes sense to have a Jill Stein and, quite frankly, a Gary Johnson on that stage to allow the American public to see there are other ways of moving forward. And unfortunately, year after year, we rob them of that. I don't think either one of them will make this debate stage this time around, and Americans will be left to choose. Democrats, as you mentioned, will always say, don't vote for a third party. Jill Stein may be wonderful, but a vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Donald Trump. And that's how they'll scare Democrats off from making that vote without the knowledge as to what Jill Stein stands for and what the Green Party stands for, which is much broader than just an environmental message. Americans don't have the opportunity to make that decision. So it's really frustrating for many of us who care particularly about what millennials and young people in this country are facing, and to whom Jill Stein and Bernie Sanders have been speaking from a policy perspective, Hillary Clinton to a lesser extent, and Donald Trump almost not at all.
All right, you raised many points there. Let me bring you in, Cliston Brown. Is the rise in popularity of the third parties because of what they stand for, or rather because the two main candidates are unattractive to many people?
Well, most Americans have no idea what the Green Party is or who it is or what it stands for. So really, the fact that the Green Party is polling as well as it is has a lot to do with the fact that both of the major party candidates are distrusted and unliked. The Green Party, aside from Ralph Nader's 2 runs, has never registered more than 0.36% of the national vote in a presidential election, has no members of Congress, no members of any state legislature. So the Green Party is not well known among the public, and I think that what we're seeing in the polling right now is very much just sort of a protest vote. But what we have seen throughout American political history is that third parties poll much better in the summer than they actually perform in the November elections. So if Jill Stein is averaging approximately 4% right now, I expect that that will taper off to 2% or less by the time we get to November.
All right, we began the program with a look at the Green Party and its policies. So let's get an idea of some of what the Libertarians stand for. The party is considered to be a combination of the Democratic and Republican parties in that it's socially liberal but fiscally conservative. They campaign on a platform of minimum government and maximum freedom, all giving individuals more personal liberties. The party is also in favour of free trade and scaling down America's budget, especially military spending. And they want to repeal the Patriot Act, which has given law enforcement agencies much greater surveillance and investigative powers. Cliston, do they suffer from the same problem as the Greens, or the Green Party rather, or do they stand more of a chance?
Well, every third party suffers from many of the same problems, some of which are institutional. The Libertarian Party, unlike the Green Party, will be on the ballot in all 50 states. So the Libertarian Party is in a stronger position, certainly. But I think that the problems that third parties face in American politics are endemic. Typically, the American voter goes to the polls in November not wanting to cast a vote that he or she knows is not going to go to somebody who has a chance to win the election. So really, the Libertarian Party is in a slightly stronger position, but certainly not with a realistic chance to win, but possibly, like the Green Party, a chance to play spoiler if the election is close.
So the key here, Jeanne, is for both the Green Party candidate and the Libertarian to make the debates, right?
That would be a huge first step, and it would be very tough for either one, although the Libertarian Gary Johnson has a much better shot at this point. Of course, we're still early in the polling in early August for a late September debate. But that would at least give the American public a chance to see other voices and other views. And you just mentioned, you know, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian Party, is the only candidate out there of the 4 major candidates who is supportive of free trade. Hillary Clinton has waffled on that and moved away from it. There's some suggestion she may go back to it if elected. But there are vast differences between Stein, Johnson, Clinton, and Trump on many key issues, and yet we don't get a chance to hear about that. Now, one of the things that happens traditionally in American politics with third parties is the major parties will eat up their issues. So if you have a candidate out there that is a libertarian candidate, we will see more and more Republican candidates adopting those positions and trying to move those supporters into the Republican fold. And by the same token, on the Green side, Democrats will try to do that. Hillary Clinton has already moved in that direction as she's tried to make headway on the issue of college education and affordability for our young people trying to pay this enormous college debt that they bear. So the parties are trying to eat up the issues and move those supporters into their fold. Unfortunately, I think the problem right now is that so many people have such negative views, not just of the major party candidates, but of the parties themselves and, you know, this awful word, the establishment of these parties, that they don't trust that the parties are going to follow through with what they want. Okay. And again, I would say Hillary Clinton on trade is a perfect example of that.
Cliston, say we look into the future and the US finds itself in a new galaxy and somebody from a third party wins. How would you get anything passed in Congress anyway if there was a 3-way split?
And that is an excellent question. And that's also a question that's relevant to the electoral college system in the United States, whereby the popular vote does not elect the president, but each state gets a certain number of electors. And everything in the United States is predicated on a majority. You have to get a majority of electors to win the presidential election. You have to have a majority in Congress to pass any kind of legislation. So really, a lot of Americans who have discontentments with the Democratic and Republican parties talk a lot about, oh, we need a third party. But in practice, that would actually be, in some ways, very unworkable, given the need for majorities in Congress and in the Electoral College to either pass any kind of legislation or to elect a president. And the American system has always produced two major parties, whether it's been the Democrats and Republicans, or prior to them, the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists, or the Whig Party, which was the predecessor of the Republican Party in the mid-19th century. It always shakes down to two parties in the end because you need majorities to get anything done.
Joe, I can bring you in now. As you said, the Republican Party has bigger things to worry about than a third party. Damaging rumors, I suspect, that Trump may step down. What sort of impact is that having?
Well, of course, there's been rumors that he'll be forced to step down. That's not likely to happen. Donald Trump certainly is not likely at this point to step down as the Republican nominee for president. As a matter of fact, in the most recent press conference he said that everything is going really well with his campaign. They're having a great week, although the polls show otherwise. Well, this is classic Donald Trump. His classic Donald Trump is to say things are going well even when they aren't going well.
So tell me something. Excuse me, jumping in here, Joe.
Party.
What happens to Republicans like you who might not necessarily support Donald Trump and what he stands for? Where does it leave you? Are you putting contingency plans in place?
Well, I think what it does is it makes it difficult for many establishment Republicans to support the Republican nominee for president. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, a few days ago, one of my former White House colleagues, who has been the chief of staff for former Governor Jeb Bush, announced that she was leaving the Republican Party for this election cycle and becoming an independent, and that she might either vote for Hillary Clinton or perhaps for Gary Johnson in the November election. And she said this because she just felt that she's not able to support the head of the ticket, Donald Trump. This will be the dilemma that a number of Republicans find themselves in, especially as Donald Trump wages war with House Speaker Paul Ryan and Senator John McCain and various other leaders in the Republican Party. I don't expect it to be a big number, but the polling numbers right now show that there are a majority of Americans who don't feel that Donald Trump is presidential. And so it's a real challenge for Republicans who've been at this for a long time and who consider themselves to be loyal bedrock Republicans. They'll have to think about what they do. As you know, during the Republican National Convention, the number two candidate, the person who came in second in the Republican primaries, the senator from Texas, told Americans on national television, instead of endorsing Donald Trump, just to vote your conscience. So even people like Senator Ted Cruz are imploring Republicans to just vote their conscience when it comes to the national election. And that presents a real challenge for Donald Trump. He needs a larger percentage of Republicans behind him right now to remain viable in a fall race.
I mean, Jeanne, seismic events happening within the Republican Party, but what if his supporters like what he's saying?
Yeah, and you know, Joe is absolutely right in terms of the discontent on the Republican side, but there are a number of people. He hovers around 44% support, and he'll likely, you know, we don't know, but he could likely carry that through to the election because he remains popular among certain segments of really discontented Americans, and not just Republicans, but some independents and moderates as well. You know, he beat out, let's not forget, 16 other contenders for this nomination, and he won it fair and square, as Paul Ryan said the other day. He didn't do that by surprise. He did that because people are incredibly frustrated with the party. And, you know, as somebody looking at it from the outside, I blame the Republican Party for not knowing where their supporters and voters are and not being able to speak to the issues they've been raising for many, many years, going back early into the Jeb Bush administration, when there was this growing discontent that led to the birth of the Tea Party movement. Donald Trump has, you know, jumped on that and been able to move that to a nomination, but it's a real challenge for him to move that into the White House because he does not have the support of the party itself, and it's really hard to win an election if you are running against your own party, and we're seeing that just in the last week.
Yeah,
and
okay,
Donald
let me,
Trump
sorry,
is one
if
of
I
the
may
few
bring
politicians
Cliston
who doesn't care.
in here. I mean, he had an opportune week to attack Hillary Clinton, and yet he failed to do that. He attacked the Gold Star parents. Cliston, where do you think this leaves Hillary? Will she benefit, and will she benefit from Obama attacking Trump on her behalf?
I think that she is clearly already benefiting, as you have seen her lead over Donald Trump go from very low single digits to anywhere from 8 to 15 percentage points just in the last few days. Clearly, Donald Trump is bombing, and this is working to the benefit of Hillary Clinton. There's no question in my mind that she is benefiting from this, and if the election were held today, as Joe said earlier, she would win in a massive landslide.
Jeanne, I liked what you said in your Huffington Post blog. You said what it takes to become president has nothing to do with what it takes to be president. You say, imagine a company hiring an accountant based on how fast she can run a mile. It seems that an overhaul is desperately needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. It's been the problem in American politics for a long time that we elect presidents not based on what it takes to be a good president or a successful president, but on many other things. And we've seen that play itself out in this election cycle. And it's incredibly frustrating because we will likely get a candidate who becomes president who may not have what it takes to be a very good president, but has managed to figure out how to get that nomination and ultimately get that ultimate prize.
Joe, what are your comments about reforming the presidential election system? Because it seems clear that the two-party system remains.
Well, it's going to be hard to reform it because so much of what we currently have is really the result of money and money spent. You know, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have taken all the oxygen out of the race for the most part because they have all the money to spend. They're the ones that are able to advertise on television and radio and in the newspapers and on the web. And the Green Party and the Libertarian Party just don't have that kind of cash to be able to effectively compete. So I agree that a lot needs to be done to overhaul the system, that the current system that we have could lead to somebody being elected president who perhaps is not best suited to run the country. But reforming that system is going to be a lot harder than saying so. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take the collective will of elected officials to make substantive changes and changes that aren't likely to happen anytime soon. There have been a number in the United States that have said, well, one of the good things, one of the effective changes that can be made to change the system and to stop the gridlock would be to have term limits. Term limits for members of the House and the Senate. We already have term limits for presidents, but if we had term limits for members of the House and the Senate, we could prevent the future stagnation that we currently see in Congress. But of course, it takes those same members of the House and the Senate to vote for term limits, and most of them are not willing to vote against themselves or against what they see as their own personal political interest. And so it's going to be very, very hard to move the dial and to change the process easily.
Cliston, if conventions and elections are a real reminder or paint a picture of the state a country's in, it's not a very pretty picture at the moment, is it?
American politics has never been a pretty picture. We talk about a lot of the things that are happening currently in American politics as if they are something new, but we have had very, very messy elections going back to the dawn of the Republic 200 some years ago. So this is really nothing new. It's just a lot more amplified. I do think that there is a tendency to think of third parties as some sort of panacea. And we talked about whether we're going to get the best qualified person to be president. But I really don't necessarily see any evidence that Jill Stein or Gary Johnson would necessarily be a better president than Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. So it's a messy process. It's always been a messy process, and it's always going to be a messy process. There's no way around that. Politics is a messy process.
And it certainly has given us a lot to talk about. Thank you very much, Joe Watkins, Jeanne Zaino, and Cliston Brown. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. And from me, Jane Dutton, and the whole team here in Doha, goodbye and thanks very much for watching.